Thank you so much. Gosh, it's an absolute, please sit down. It's an absolute joy to be with you. Becky Denhardt works with us. And Becky said to me some time ago, would you come and speak at my church? And we said, sure. And she said, I'll be there and I'll support you. And she can't be here. She's off somewhere. But she is an incredible gift to us. And it's just a thrill, honestly, to be with you. Thank you so much for coming. Let me read a couple of verses from the Bible to you, if I may, from 1 Corinthians chapter 1. Brothers and sisters, think of what you were when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many of you were influential. Not many of you were of noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of this world and the despised things and the things that are not, to nullify the things that are, so no one can boast before him. And it is because of him that you are in Christ Jesus, who has become for us wisdom from God. That is our righteousness, holiness, and redemption. And therefore, as it is written, let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord. I was talking the other day with my wife, Dan, about old films that we loved, and there were many we talked about. And then we came to an old film that some of you may have seen. It's called Dead Poets Society. And there's a lovely scene in it where Robin Williams takes a class of boys down the corridor, and he stands them in front of a big glass cabinet containing photographs of previous pupils. All now dead, all gone. Died in 2 world wars. And he stands behind these boys and he says, boys, listen in, look at the photographs. And these young men look at these photographs, sepia photographs of previous pupils, long gone. And he says, can you hear what they're saying to you? Listen in, you'll hear them speak to you. And they listen in, they say, sir, we can't hear anything. And he says, listen in closer. And they listen closer. And they say, sir, we still can't hear anything. And he says, listen even closer. And suddenly Williams is behind them. And he's whispering, Carpe diem. Carpe diem. Seize the day. A friend of mine is professor of psychology at Oxford University. He said a fascinating thing to me not long ago. He said, Rob, most people believe a future event will make them happy. If I could win the lottery, if we could move house, if I could pass that exam, if we could do this, then I'll be happy. He said, sometimes it's pretty small. When I go out with my mates on Saturday night, then I'll be really happy. He said, you know what, Rob? Most happy people grasp it now. He said, I'm not talking about the dreadful things that sometimes people go through, but largely for most of us, if we're going to grasp it, we have to do it now. Because now is all we have. You and I in this church together on this Sunday morning, this is our now. And whether we are young or older, and there will be all kinds of people here today. Some of you are doing great in life and some of you are struggling. Some of you are married, some single, some with kids, some without kids. If you've got kids, some of your kids are doing well, some of your kids are breaking your heart. Some of you are doing well financially, some of you struggling. Some of you sure about what you believe. Some of you don't believe what you used to believe. For some of you, faith is dying in your hearts. Somebody here sure you don't believe anything. Somewhere here is a friend who's been dragged here by a husband or wife or somebody else. They said, come and hear this great preacher. Let me tell you something about great preachers. Whenever you bring somebody to hear them, they're always a disaster. So if your friend is dragged, you go easy on them afterwards. All kinds of people. But you know what? However you have come, you're welcome. And this is our now. This is our moment. And I want to talk to you briefly about a couple of things that we're going to have to put in place if we're going to seize that day. Whatever age we are and whatever we're going through, and whether we're 15, 16, or 96, Paul in the Bible says this: redeem the time because the days are evil. And he could have used one of 2 words for time. He could have used the Greek word chronos, which means an era, but he picked kairos. And kairos means a period of time that will never, ever be repeated. You know, we're always thinking about tomorrow, what we're going to do. If only I was more gifted. If only I could pass that exam. If only No, what can we begin now? So I want to talk to you about a couple of things that can change your life and everybody else's life if only we could begin them now. And the first is, you have to begin with what you have. My mum and dad weren't wealthy. Dad was a postman, mum was an office cleaner. We had a little terraced house. We didn't have an inside toilet. We didn't have running hot water. We didn't have a bathroom. We didn't even have toilet paper. Don't even ask. Except even now, I can't look at a copy of the South Wales Echo without a million memories coming flooding back. And you know what? Somehow I passed the 11 plus exam, but I got in that grammar school. It was like a Mars. I didn't understand it. Was I lazy? Perhaps I was, but I honestly don't think I understood it. I would come home and I'd ask my parents to help me with my homework, and they wanted to, but they couldn't really. We only had 3 books in our home, and there were kids in that school that had tutors and books, and I didn't do well academically in school. In fact, in my study, I've still got my report book that catalogues the 7 years I was in that school. And when I was 14, the Easter report catalogues 2 things: that there are 34 boys in my class, and I have come 34th. My form teacher wrote at the bottom, a disgraceful result. He's making no use of what little ability he has. I don't argue with that, honestly, I don't. And I'm 15 years old, and my parents didn't go to church, but they sent me to a little gospel hall on the corner street. By the way, in our next session, the next service later on, I want to take you inside some of the Gospels, and I'll tell you about Miss Williams, who called for me when I came to Sunday school. That's a little trailer if you want to come back. The truth is, I'll be lucky to keep you for this one. I understand that. But if you're not, yeah. And I'm about to drop out of church. I'm about 15, 16. And I'm about to drop out of school because I don't understand school. And all I want to do is be a rock and roll singer. And I'm walking down the road. I'm about 16 years old. I got a guitar on my back. I got an Elvis Presley-style haircut. I got 10 embassy tipped in my back pocket. And an older man from church comes up to me, Arthur Tovey. Arthur and his wife were poor. They lived in 2 rooms in his mother's house. Arthur had a very bad speech impediment. Arthur and Margaret were told at that time they could not have children of their own. Arthur had never passed an academic examination in his life. But they loved kids. Arthur and Margaret loved kids. And he said to me, Rob, next Wednesday, Margaret and I are starting a little Bible study in our home. Would you like to come? Ladies and gentlemen, when all you want to do is walk onto the stage in Las Vegas, dressed in gold lame, a Bible study on a Wednesday night, it's not the greatest offer you've ever had. But for some reason I said, yes. He was a brilliant psychologist. He knew we'd get a bit bored, so he taught us what he could from the Bible for about 25 minutes. And then in that tiny room, he put 2 bits of hardboard on top of a dining table and made a table tennis table. We played ping pong. We played with the bats up against our chest. If the ball went underneath the table, it was an engineering job to get it out again. And then with what little money he had, he bought us fish and chips. And as we're coming back from the chip shop and the vinegar is seeping through the paper, Margaret, his wife, would have the tea brewing. When you walked into Arthur and Margaret's home, you felt like a king. No matter what teachers or anybody else said about you, and I promise you, teachers are my heroes, but sometimes they get it wrong. Arthur told you you were special. Margaret told you that God had given you gifts. And I would say, if I may, to some of you younger people, whatever anybody else says about you, you have nothing to prove. You are special in your own right, as you are, how you look, with the gifts God has given you. That doesn't mean we all want to improve. We want to be the best we can be. Isn't that so? But you are special. And Arthur told me that. Do you know what? If you missed that class, he'd come hunting you down. And when I was about 16 and a half, 17, he said to me, Rob, do you ever take part in debates in school? I said, Arthur, I don't even put my hand up in class. He said, I think God has given you a gift of public speaking, and I'm going to teach you. That was scary. He was the worst public speaker you've ever heard in your life. But he did. He taught me to teach the parable of the prodigal son to children. I'm not exactly sure how it happened, but by the time I was in my early 30s, I was a joint senior partner of a 10-office legal practice. And I was lecturing all across the world to thousands of lawyers on how to build a legal practice. And one day, the Law Society of England and Wales asked me to be a keynote speaker at the Law Society conference in Vienna, in front of 1,000 lawyers. And I'm in Vienna, and I'm about to go on stage, and I decide to ring Arthur on my new mobile phone. In those days, it was the size of a small semi-detached house. And I rang Arthur, and I said, Arthur, I'm about to go on stage. There's 1,000 lawyers out there. Wow, Rob, he said. I said, you taught me to do this. He said, did I? And about 3 years later, I was promoting one of my books in America, and they got him live on air in the radio studio from his home in Cardiff, and they interviewed him. And at the end of the interview, the radio host said, what do you think of the boy who came to your Bible class? He said, I'm proud of him. I cried on air. Arthur and Margaret had nothing. But they must have sat down one day and said to each other, darling, we don't seem to have very much. We can't have kids of our own right now. I've got this speech impediment. We haven't passed any exams. We haven't got any money. But you know what, darling? We've got 2 rooms, haven't we? Do you think if we saved our money, we could get some kids and buy them fish and chips, teach them a bit of the Bible? If we put some hardboard on top of the dining table, do you think we'd play ping pong if they got bored? Why don't we give it a shot? He must have been like the little boy on the hillside in Jesus' time, who sees there's a fracas going on, and it's obvious they don't have enough food to feed the 5,000, and suddenly he looks down at the lunch his mother made him, and this incredible plan grows in his mind, and he begins to push his way through the crowd, and then something inside says, sit down, you fool. Who do you think you are? It's Peter, James, and John up there. And perhaps he almost did sit down, but he knew if he did, he could never live with himself. And from somewhere he gets the courage to say, perhaps to Peter, look, it's just the lunch my mother made me. If the master wants it, he can have it. And suddenly he sees the lunch his mother made him in the hands of the carpenter, as the carpenter calls down the blessing of Yahweh on it. And he is breaking it to the crowd and breaking it again. And when he was old, he told the story to his children's children. You may not think you've got very much. You've probably got as much as Arthur and Margaret. And even if you haven't, you've got something. Do you know, he died not too long ago. And when I last saw him in hospital, he was practically comatose, but I put my lips next to his ear, and I said, Arthur, thank you. You changed my life. And I kissed him. So what God said to Moses, what's in your hand? What do we have that we can begin with? If we're going to seize the day, we have to just begin with what we are, whether we're 16 or 96. We have to begin with what we have. Secondly, we have to begin where we are. I've been married for a long time, over 50 years. I must have got married when I was 2 years old. And some time ago, Dan and I had been married, I don't know, about 10, 15 years. And I was asked to speak in front of 300 doctors and social workers alongside a theologian on the family. And as I was about to go and speak, Diane said to me, can I come and say something? I said, darling, you've never spoken to anybody in public. How would you manage it? She said, I think I'll be fine. Ring the organizers up, asking me if I can speak for 10 minutes, something practical about family life. So I rang the organizers up. I said, can my wife say something for 10 minutes? They said, sure. But they didn't know she'd never spoken in public, and I didn't tell them. Dr. Nigel Cameron, the theologian, speaks for 3/4 hour on the theology of the family. I speak for about a half an hour on some practical family stuff. And then I say, would you welcome my wife, Diane? But I had no idea what she was going to say. I last heard Diane say what she said that day in the Royal Albert Hall in front of almost 4,000 women. I've heard her say it in the Birmingham Symphony Hall. I've heard her say it in the Scottish Exhibition Centre. I've heard her say it all over the world. She has spoken to tens of thousands of women. This is what she said on that morning. In many ways, life was perfect. I had a little girl of 3, and I had a little newborn baby son. We were lying in bed in a lovely home. Lying next to me was my husband who loved me. The only problem was I just whispered to Rob, "Darling, I don't think I can cope anymore. Could you take Katie to nursery today?" Gosh, guys, I remember Diane saying those words as though it were yesterday. And I said, "Sure, I'll take Katie." But if I thought that was going to be that day sorted out, that week I was wrong, that month, that year, those words ushered in years of darkness for Diane and I. Her immune system crashed. She went into something of a depressive illness. Those were dark times. And I remember kneeling one night in the darkness with another leader from our church. And I'm a hotshot lawyer, and people ring me, and I fix things, and I make it happen, and I'm crying, and Diane's in bed upstairs. I put the kids to bed, and this leader and I are kneeling in the darkness, and I cry out to God, "I can't fix this. I can't fix this." And after a while, Diane got to be a little bit better, but she still wasn't well enough to go to church. And she said to me one day, "Rob, do you think we could have a little group in our home?" And I was a leader in that church then, and I talked to the other guys, and they said, "Sure." And we began a little group in our home on a Wednesday night called For Strugglers. It was for those who'd had emotional breakdown. It was for those who'd had a faith and lost it. For those who were sure they didn't believe anything. It was for the broken. And we said, "Look, if you're a struggler, come around." People cried out to get into that little group. I remember opening the door one night, and there's a GP there, a doctor, and our church had about 20 house groups. And I said, "I think you've come to the wrong group." No, he said, "I want to be in the strugglers group." All we had to share with those people was our weakness. We didn't have any clever answers. I remember saying to a very bright young social worker, very difficult woman actually, quite cynical, I said, "Jill, I'm sorry you haven't got a better example of Christians to see. We're going through a bit of a rough time at the moment." "Oh," she said, "you're fine." But she was very cynical, very difficult. And I remember that night we're washing up, Dan and I said to Diane, "You know, I don't think Jill will ever come to Christ." It was about 11 o'clock. We were about to fall off to sleep that night, and my phone went by my bed. It was Jill. She said, "Rob, I'm sorry to wake you." No, I'm awake." "What is it?" She said, "He has met me." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, I was driving home across the mountain. I was on my own. Steve wasn't with me. And suddenly the car is filled with this sense of love. I feel incredible forgiveness towards my family. I felt his presence. She said, "My heart is physically hurting." She said, "Will it be like this tomorrow?" I said, "I got no idea. It's never happened to me. You're very fortunate." Jill came to Christ that night, and Steve found his faith afterwards again. They're our closest friends. They've done so much in the kingdom. All we had to share was our weakness. We didn't. Do you know what? One of our fundamental core values in Care for the Family is vulnerability. Do you know what I say to our would-be volunteers? If you've got a perfect family, if you've got 3 perfect kids, and they save their pocket money for Shakespeare study guides, and they complain the church services aren't long enough, and they do the washing up without you asking them, and you're such a great parent, you can't wait to share your gems with the world, you're not our kind of person. We need people who've cried a bit. Can you work for Care for the Family and help people in their marriages if you've known the pain of divorce? Yes. Can you help people with their money if you've been in trouble financially? Yes. Can you help people with parenting if your own kids have broken your heart? Yes. We are the vulnerable. We have to begin with what we have. We have to begin where we are. And that's why I read you that bit from 1 Corinthians. Because God loves to use the weak things of the world, the things that don't seem great. We don't have to have it all together. There's somebody here this morning. Of course, I don't really know if you're here, but I'll bet you are. And you don't feel very great at the moment. You didn't particularly feel like worshiping like the others did. You've got a faith, but it's not that real to you recently, and you've just come along. But you have some gifts. And although you have been through a tough time, and although there's been lots of pain and tears, those tears can be used to help others. You know, some of the greatest words we can ever speak to another person are, I understand. Some of you are in the middle of a depressive illness, and the tablets are helping a bit, but perhaps not much. You still wake every day with that sick feeling in your stomach. Can you imagine reaching out to somebody else and saying, oh, I understand. You, yes, I understand. I've been there. You begin with what you have. You begin where you are. And thirdly, you believe in the power of little things. Jesus said, even if you give a cup of cold water in my name, you won't lose your reward. I heard the other day of a vicar that went to visit an old lady in hospital. And as he was leaving, he kissed her. And she said, Vicar, kiss me again. He said, Doris, why do you want me to kiss you twice? She said, because since my husband died, nobody has kissed me. Dan spoke to a woman some time ago. She said, where are you going tonight, Susan? She said, I'm going ballroom dancing. She said, do you like ballroom dancing? No, my dear. But it's the only time of the week when anybody touches me. I was watching television with Diane at home some time ago, and the phone went. We're in the middle of some blooming crime series or something. And the phone went. And I heard Diane say, oh, I'm sorry, you've got a wrong number. And then she kept talking. In fact, she was talking for about 10 minutes. When she came back, I said, what was that about? Bless her heart, she said it was an elderly lady. And when I said it was a wrong number, she said, my dear, please don't hang up. You're the first person I've spoken to this week. And she said, you know what? Well, I think she should spend some of the evening dialing random numbers in the hope she gets somebody who will speak to her. And I took her number, and there is such loneliness. You don't have to change the world. There is such a need for little things, for little touches. Friday night, Dan and I went to see the film Elvis. Any of you seen it yet? It was first out on, I absolutely loved it. Honestly, we had a whale of a time. But as we're going into the cinema, you know, one of these big cinemas, foyers outside, we go in, and outside the cinema is a man. He's about 45 years old, tall guy, and he's got about 4 little kids with him, and he's got suitcases. And Dan said to me, what's that all about? He's got suitcases, he's done. So we get into the foyer, we got our tickets, and she said to me, go and ask him if you can help him. So I said, fine. So I go out and I said, sir, can I help you? Do you look, can I give you a lift somewhere? And he said, no, he was a foreign guy, I won't attempt to. But he was a foreign guy, he said, no, I'm waiting for a taxi. I don't know what story's behind it, but he was so grateful, he said, thank you. He waved to Diane, he thanked her. And when we sat down, you know that bit about Jesus said at the end of time, I was in prison, you visited me, and I was hungry. You remember when he said it was me all along? And I said to Dan, perhaps that was Jesus. She said, yes, and if it was, tell him it was me who sent you out there. I said, you know what, Dad? You're like that person in Isaiah. Lord, here I am, send him. It's only a little thing, isn't it? I don't know what, well, if he'd have said he needed a lift, I'd have given her a lift. She'd have to watch the movie on her own. But it's not a big thing, is it? But I'll tell you something. When I end up standing in front of Jesus, and he says, you can bring one thing with you. Do you want to bring the time you spoke to X thousand people? Would you want to bring that? Or you can bring one other thing. I say, no, well, can I bring the time that Diane sent me out to say to the guy with cases, can I help you? Because I know that touches your heart. You don't have to do great things. Begin with what you have. Begin where you are. Believe in the power of little things. And then realize that perhaps the greatest yearning in people's hearts is for someone to tell them that they are accepted. Do you know, all over the world, I say to parents, what is the greatest gift a parent can give a child? And hands go up in New York or Sydney or parts of Africa, and they all give the same answer. Love is the greatest gift. Yes, that is true. But there is another gift. And if this gift is not given, a child, a friend, a husband, a wife will never believe they are loved. It is the gift of acceptance. To say to somebody else, you are accepted, is why I said to you young people today, you are accepted. There's nothing to prove. Who you are, how you look, you are accepted. You know, when I was a kid, I was not only no good academically, I was no good at practical things either. That's a double whammy, isn't it? And I remember when the woodwork exam came along, we had the chance to build one of two things, either a coffee table or a potato plunger. You may not know what a potato plunger is, but imagine a shovel with the metal bit taken off the end and made into a point. That's a potato plunger. It makes a hole in the ground for potatoes. It wasn't complicated. I looked at the plans for the coffee table. I knew I could never do it. I gave that potato plunger everything I had. And finally, I remember, guys, I promise you this is a totally true story. I lay it on the desk. And here comes the woodwork teacher. I remember it now. Again, I'm about 14 years old. And he passes tables, coffee table after coffee table after coffee table, and finally comes to mine. And he looks at me, and then he looks down and he said to me, "What is it?" I thought that was very hard. It obviously wasn't the coffee table. I said, "Sir, it's a potato plunger. You put it." He said, "It's dreadful." I said, "Sir, I did my best." And you know what? I can remember his words as though he was sat next to me now. He said, "Parsons, your best is not good enough." Where'd you go as a kid of 14 when your best isn't good enough? In fact, where'd you go as a woman of 40 or 50 or a man of 60 when your best isn't good enough? Dr. R.T. Kendall, my dear friend and theologian, got his doctorate from Oxford, Westminster Chapel, 25 years, speaks all over the world. He told me one day, he said, "I remember running home from school with my report card, and I run up the drive and I say to my father, 'Dad, I came second in the music exam in the whole of my county.' And my father said, 'Won't you ever come first?'" And I'll tell you, if you've got parents, and if you're parents, and if you're not, but you have kids that you care about, we've got to be very careful here. Because on the one hand, we're trying to motivate our kids to be the best they can be, but we also have to let them know that they are loved anyway. And that is a delicate balance. Because if you will have more than one child, you will have chalk and cheese. That's particularly galling if the first one is compliant. Because that's what lures you into having the second one. Because for a while you thought you were a great parent. It happened to us. We thought we were brilliant parents. We used to give other parents negative advice where they were going wrong. Look at us, being more like, look at Katie. It's not a good idea. Lloyd came into the world smoking a cigar. That kid used to wake up every day of his young life with the same prayer on those tiny lips. "Dear God, help me drive my mother crazy today." And every day, God answered his prayer. And do you know what he said to me when he was 14? He said, "Dad, I don't believe this now. But sometimes when I was little, I used to think you loved Katie a bit more than me." I said, "Son, I understand that. Because whenever there was trouble, you were in the middle of it. And I now know that Katie, the little sneak, used to shove some of her trouble onto you." I remember overhearing him say to a friend on the phone, "If your sister hits you, don't ever hit her straight back. They always catch the second one." But I want that boy to know he is accepted. I want him to know he is loved. There is nothing to prove. The saddest letter I ever got in Care for the Family, I know it word for word, was from a woman. She said, "Rob, thanks for coming to our town with your event. I enjoyed it." She said, "I was a disappointment to my father. He wanted a son. He never hugged me, never told me he loved me, never praised me. He thought praise might make me big-headed." She said, "I know he was a product of his generation, but I'm often depressed. I'm riddled with guilt." And then she wrote these words, "I am 85 years old. 85 years old. I've tried to imagine her as a girl of 4 running home with a painting for her father. And he would say, no, cows don't have 5 legs, cows have 4 legs. Dressing as a teenager to please him. Perhaps taking the career he wanted it to have. Do you know what? She wanted to be an actress. He wanted her to be a chartered accountant. Nothing wrong with that, except she was meant to dance her way through life on stages. And she spent 40 years crunching numbers. And he's long since dead. And she'll be dead soon herself. But even now, he's like a ghost at her shoulder, demanding she become somebody she just can't be. But I'm telling you this morning in your church, whatever you believe or don't believe, you and I are sometimes a disappointment to our Heavenly Father, but we're never a surprise to Him. You are both loved and accepted. And I'm telling you, you and I will never find love like that anywhere else. So I would say to some of you younger people, don't throw that faith away too quickly. Think about it. You will never find anybody who loves you like that. There is somebody who knows you exactly as you are, and loves you and accepts you. It doesn't mean he doesn't want you to change. Max Lucado said, it is true he loves you as you are, but he loves you too much to leave you as you are. So don't go into cheap grace and just think you can take him for granted. He is your Father. Sometimes I used to give Lloyd what I called him study talks. He'd come into my studies, he'd say, oh no, a study talk. Sometimes God gives me study talks. He is my Father, but I am loved. Guys, if you are to seize the day, and I am to seize the day, let's begin with what we have. Begin with where we are, even if it's not what we have chosen. Believe in the power of little things, and understand the craving the world has to know there is somebody who accepts them. I'm so grateful to you for listening to Robin in Care for the Family. Thank you for that. It'd be lovely to meet you afterwards at the stand if some of you want to become partners. I'd love to sign that book for you. And if you want it signed to somebody else, let me know. I'll do that. But thank you for inviting us into your church this morning. It's an absolute privilege to be here. But as I finish, let me end with one story which is my favorite story in the whole world. Because I think if you and I are to seize the day, we have to do this. We have to keep our eyes on another world. Because although we have to seize this moment, it's not all about this moment. So let me tell you the story of a little boy whose parents owned one of the very first telephones. They lived on the plains in America. He said it was a wooden thing. He said they brought it to my home and they put it on the wall, and my mother would wind it up and she would say, information, please. And a voice would say, this is information. And information, please, would get them a number or tell them the time or even prophesy the weather. He said, one day when I was 9 years old, Mum and Dad were out and I banged my thumb with a hammer. He said there was no point crying because there was nobody in. And then I remembered the telephone. And I got a stool and I stood on it and I wandered up and I said, information, please. And a voice said, this is information. And I said, I banged my thumb. And information, please, said, is your mummy in? No. Is your daddy in? No. Is it bleeding? No. Could you get to the ice box? Yes. Hold some ice against it. He said it worked. He said after that I rang information police for anything. Information police helped me with my geography homework. She told me where Pennsylvania is. Information police taught me to spell disappear. And when my pet canary died, I cried and said, why would God make anything that can sing so beautifully and let it die? Information police said, Paul, you must always remember there are other worlds to sing in. And then my parents moved to New York City, and I was out of her area. And anyway, I didn't believe that information police could live in this new plastic phone, and I never rang her again. So I was 24 years old. And I flew into my old town, and I'm in the airport lounge, and I look at the phone and think, I wonder. And I dial and I say, information, please. And a voice says, this is information. And I said, could you teach me to spell disappear? And she said, I expect that thumb is better by now. And I said, have you any idea what you meant to me? She said, have you any idea what you meant to me? We didn't have children of our own. I used to love it when you rang me. Now, you remember my name's Sally. If ever you're in my area, you ring me, won't you? And he said, I promised I would. And often I would manage to get through to her, and we would talk. And one day I rang, and I said, information, please. And a different voice said, this is information. And I said, could I speak to Sally? And the lady said, oh, sir, I'm so sorry. Sally died a couple of weeks ago. She was very old. She only came in occasion. Oh, I'm sorry to trouble you. No, wait. Is your name Paul? Why, yes, it is. Well, Sally said, if you happen to ring, we must be sure to give you this message. Paul, you must always remember there are other worlds to sing in. Seize the moment, but keep your head high on that other world. There is more than this. So although outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. And our light and momentary trouble is achieving for us a glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes, not on what is seen, but what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but that which is unseen will last forever. God bless you.